On the 9th of May, the first in a series of international seminars was held at Southwest University of Political Science and Law here in Chongqing, the main theme of which was the guarantee of the rights to life in epidemic prevention and control. One of the guest speakers from overseas was Mr. Jainath Columbage. So during his presentation, he talked about the topic of response to COVID-19, human rights or rights to life. So this evening, it is my pleasure to have Mr. Jainath Columbage join us to discuss his expert's opinion in more detail and his views on the epidemic response on an international level. So Mr. Jainath Columbage, welcome to iChongqing.
Thank you. Good evening to you.
So first of all, for our audience, could I ask you to say a few words about yourself?
Okay, I'm a former retired Navy chief and I retired 5 years ago. And I'm Admiral Jainath Columbage. Now I am working with the President of Sri Lanka. I'm the Additional Secretary to President on Foreign Relations. And I also right now head the National Defense think tank called the National Institute of Security Studies. But formally, I was with the Pathfinder Foundation as the director of Lanka initiatives, as well as the Law of the Sea. And we work quite closely with the Chongqing, the Swapul, and I first came to Swapul with the Pathfinder Foundation delegation 2 years ago. And I have been working with Chinese universities. In fact, I'm an adjunct professor at the National Institute of South China Sea Studies in Haikou, and I'm also a guest professor in Sichuan University. And I have been working quite closely with the Chinese counterparts in here in Sri Lanka as well as in China and also abroad. And I've been focusing on the COVID because my link to COVID is because I'm a member of the COVID-19 combating task force in Sri Lanka, representing the interest of the president. So I do have a direct connection to combating and controlling COVID-19 in Sri Lanka. That's me.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'd like to do next then is I would like you to repeat your statement from the seminar, Guarantee of the Right to Life in Epidemic Prevention and Control. So basically, could you tell us again what you said in the presentation yesterday at the seminar at Southwest University?
Okay, so let me begin at the beginning. In Sri Lanka, the COVID-19 or the coronavirus was never heard before. So in the month of January, now by that time, this is all the beginning of February. We actually had quarantine centers here. Although we had a single case of coronavirus, we had quarantine centers in Sri Lanka. Then the third association with COVID-19 was actually an Italian tourist who were touring in Sri Lanka. Through that lady, one of our tour guides got it. And fortunately, the tour guide did not give it to many people. That also became a small cluster and we could really control. But then the moment it went towards Middle East, that is mainly Iran, and then Spain and Italy, I think that some countries lost the game. So therefore, people who returned to Sri Lanka from Italy, South Korea, and Iran, and India, and Dubai, they brought the third wave back to Sri Lanka. But then you see, we unfortunately we had few cases going into the society. But then we started quarantine each and every passenger coming back to Sri Lanka. Now, about 90% of COVID-19 cases identified positive in Sri Lanka actually has come from the quarantine centers. So, which means that we did not allow from the beginning for the COVID-19 to be a community spread. We stopped at a small community, that is the family or the immediate neighborhood, maybe one or two, or immediate colleague, one or two. so we could limit it at that time. Now, if I share with the figures totally, now it's like 3 months, we had we have had 847 cases of COVID-19. Now, when I say 847, I have to mention out of this, 322 people cured and gone back to home. So that means they are no longer in that category. Unfortunately, 9 people died. So, in fact, right now, what we have is about 516 total cases of COVID-19, but they are not a single patient in ICU, not a single patient in a ventilator right now. So that is good news. Now, of course, it was headed by a minister or the Minister of Health. Now, the idea of setting up this action committee was basically to make recommendation, because I mean, as in the case of the world, this was something new to us. We did not know what it was, so we wanted to find out. Right now, this is the time. Even the World Health Organization did not come out with some guidelines. They were just studying it. Everyone was studying it. So we also had a similar thing in Sri Lanka, and I think that's something we really got a preventive attitude from the beginning. And then, you see, in Sri Lanka, we all talk about this COVID curve. You know, it's going as a J. It goes up like this, and it just boomerang up to the top. That is the exponential curve. But we have been holding on to this curve to keep it as much level as possible. And also, I must say that some countries supported us. India supported us. China supported us big time, right? So that is something we really needed, because we did not have COVID-19 test kits. We did not have personal protective equipment. So China really came to support us in three ways. One, from the government of China, because they donated large consignments of personal protective equipment and test kits. And two, through Alibaba, I mean Jack Ma of Alibaba fame, he sent 2 plane loads of items. The number three, from the well-wishers, the friends of Sri Lanka, to our various embassies in Guangzhou, in Shanghai, in Beijing. And I mentioned about setting up an action committee in the beginning, setting up quarantine centers from the beginning, having measures at the airport to detect a suspected or a person showing some kind of systems. Now, we also developed a system of home quarantine. When you see, in the contact tracing, you have a contact, then you identify the first ring, the immediate contact of that person. Then you identify the second ring. Then you identify the third ring, right? So the third ring, we advise them to be careful at home, right? Just hang around at home, be careful. Second ring, we said, okay, sometime you may have to check into a quarantine center, or stay home quarantine. The first ring, no choice. You have to come to the quarantine center, but we will look after you. We will provide you food. We will provide you everything. You have to stay with us for 14 days. Another thing that we have been doing is, there are a large number of Sri Lankans studying abroad, working abroad, visiting abroad. So now, stage by stage, we are bringing them back to Sri Lanka, but we do it in a step by step, group by group manner, because we don't want them to be exposed in Sri Lanka, and we don't want Sri Lankan living in Sri Lanka to be exposed to the people who are coming from outside. I think the main question asked yesterday was whether right to life is, I mean, how do we look at right to life in through the COVID-19? Now, in Sri Lanka, because I personally know, the president is very keen on figures. Figures means, if somebody is dead, he'll be very unhappy. I think that is how we have been able to keep the mortalities, the rate of mortality in Sri Lanka is merely less than 1%. We were very particular about the life. So, in that sense, I think here we actually gave very high consideration to the right of life, right? Now, I think this brings us to a question, even about a highly developed, highly sophisticated, highly advanced, very well developed economy. If a country is not protecting the lives of its own citizen, what is the point? So this is the question that in Sri Lanka we keep asking others. So that's what we are now trying to. We have a strategy to lock out in a stage by stage, gradual manner. Still, the high risk district will remain closed for another 3 or 4 days until we bring the situation totally under control in the high risk district. So this is basically what Sri Lanka has done, how Sri Lanka tackled this, giving right to life, very high prominence, very high attention. Yes, people criticize initially. Why are you restricting our movement? Right? Why are you asking us to stay home? How are we going to earn our living? Now, who's going to run our workshop? There were questions, but then government address one by one, they address these issues. Then people realize, oh, this is for their own good, and now there is no issue. People are abiding by. Now, I heard yesterday the gentleman, I think he from Sweden, he mentioned in Sweden the government said it is up to you, right? It is up to the people to decide what they have to do. Well, it wouldn't work here. So we have to have rules and regulations. And then now, of course, people are abiding by it very clearly because they have realized that it is for their own good.
Okay, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Okay, so the next question I want to ask about is about the situation in reopening for business. So, in many countries around the world, the epidemic is still a serious issue. The infection rates are still rising. But in spite of that, there are governments around the world who are keen to open up for business as soon as possible for economic reasons. So the question I would like to ask you is, in your opinion, is that an infringement on the people's rights to life?
Well, you see, I mean, in the beginning of the COVID-19 spread, especially towards Europe, there was this argument, right? The economy must go on, the work must go on. The viruses come and go, but the country's economy must go on. But then, when people started dying, people are running out of ventilators, people are running out of ICU beds. So, what is the purpose of having a very solid economy when the when your people are dying? I think that is something we had been very mindful not to allow that to happen. What is the right time to open? If you are a country without a community spread, that decision is relatively easy. But in Sri Lanka, even that decision, a lot of attention is being paid into, right? Because we don't have a community spread, but we are very mindful about a possibility of a resurgence. It's coming back. It may be in the bodies of people. So now, whether by opening, are you opening the doors to a more community spread and more people to die? I think that is a very crucial decision political leaders or the leaders of a country should make, considering every aspect.
So I want to ask you in this final question. So, what criticisms about China's response are you aware of, and what is your personal opinion of them?
So, without having conclusive evidence, I think it's not correct to pinpoint at a particular source, right? That is one thing. But then on the other hand, this is a virus, right? This is not a nuclear bomb which has a trademark. This is not a intercontinental ballistic missile which has a name on it, right? We really don't know how it came. Now, even the World Health Organization has not concluded the origin of the virus, right? And how it spread. Now, whether it was really originated in Wuhan and then spread it to the whole world, or whether it originated simultaneously in different parts of the world, we don't know yet. So, in that situation, I think it is not right to jump to a conclusion and accuse a particular country in that, and then mocking the country, even through cartoon. I have read that that also happened. I think we need to be more disciplined. we need to be more civilized, we need to be more respecting than what we have seen. So I think it's not right to name a particular country or to mimic or to make that country something degrading remarks and stigmatizing. You see, the funniest, the saddest part is now if you actually see the control that China has made, I think it's remarkable. And I believe that they have told the world that it was coming. So we should have taken precautions and not blame China for the virus. We should have taken preemptive measures to protect us from the virus rather than trying to point a finger at another country.
Okay, so at this stage, I would like to offer my deep gratitude to Professor Janeth Kallenbach for his time and also the efforts and thought that have gone into the answers this evening. And thank you for joining the program this evening, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay.